It's the Awake Space Astrology Podcast. I'm Laurie Rivers with you, here to help you with some inspiration to get those aspirations out into the world. And we're talking about February's astrology this week. Yeah, we are, because February is right around the corner. Believe it or not, I told you 2024 was going to start in like a 3-phase rocket launch. And after Uranus stationed direct, everything is all systems go. We're flinging into the future. Time keeps on slipping into the future. And that's really what's going on. Oh man. Anyway, whole segment on February's astrology. Patrons, I'm going to go into a little more depth with you on that in your patron only podcast. Of course, we've got patron shout outs, because without patrons, there is no podcast, because I'm not going to run random ads of companies I don't approve of, because it's my principles and my ethics and all that crap. We're going to talk about the Mercury and Pluto conjunction that's happening on the 5th of February coming up. And that's going to be really, that's a poop show. I'm going to also give you a little segment about the rumor going around about Michelle Obama. I gave you my thoughts on that in this episode. And then, of course, Patreon. The patrons, Patreon. It is really early in the morning, and I have not been to bed yet. So, astrology Q&A from patrons of the the Awake Space Patreon. So, whether we're driving to work together this Monday morning, or we are folding laundries, doing dishes, going shopping, taking the kids to school, maybe we don't feel good, maybe we got a headache, or maybe we're curled up in a blankie and sipping some tea, or maybe the weather finally turned around for us and we can take a walk in the park and just listen and sit there and have that home brewed cup of tea, coffee, hot cocoa, whatever you're taking. Anyway, we're in it together, guys. So it's February is a wild month. So I'm just gonna say that this week is a good time to kind of just relax, especially like Monday through Friday this week is a little less intense than what we're gonna see for the next few weeks. Oh, baby, it's a wild world. She's singing and she's laughing in the face of danger. You don't want to miss this episode, guys. It's also not depressing. I mean, honestly, it shouldn't surprise you either. And I give you really great strategies, house by house, for navigating the intense energy of Mercury and Pluto conjunct in Aquarius, and how you can use that energy. Patrons, you're going to get some really good info coming up in your patron only podcast. You can join the Awake Space Patreon by clicking in the show notes. Show notes got a lot of information this time, folks. Astrology questions I answered had to do with Saturn returns. If you check out the link in the show notes, you'll find the YouTube video I did about how to find out if you're in a Saturn return and what is a Saturn return anyway. That's good education. I answer questions about readings. There were some good ones there. And then also somebody asking a question about investing money. And I gave my astrological thoughts on that. And so much more. All right, friends. Let's get on with it. If you're driving, keep your hands on 10 and 2. Keep your eyes on the road. We'll find perfect parking. Don't fret. All right. Let's get on with the show. right, guys, we have a heck of a month coming up in February. Okay. If you thought January was something, just wait, there's more. February 2024 is just very disruptive in its scope. And I did a video that expressed both my feelings on having to give the mood as well as a very general overview of what's going on in 2024, and it involved rubber chickens. I was not the talent behind the rubber chickens and them doing O Fortuna. That was Mr. Chicken's account on TikTok. It makes me smile every time I see their videos. In fact, I can have the worst day, and then there's this chicken doing some musical rendition. And when I came across the O Fortuna, I was like, I can definitely use that. Because if I have to give crappy news, I'm going to do it with rubber chickens. And that's kind of how I feel about February. If I had a rubber chicken, we'd be using that. Yeah. So let me pull up my slides. Because it's I'm not gonna lie, February's a lot. And that is because we're going to have planets making aspect with Pluto. Now, it's different than when planets were in Capricorn making aspect with Pluto in Capricorn. These are planets in Aquarius making aspects with Pluto in Aquarius. And Pluto is always transformation. It's always intense, but the flavor of the intensity is different. And so Pluto in Capricorn was very heavy energy, like swimming in concrete energy. Hit you at your core foundation, wrecking ball type energy. With Pluto in Aquarius, it's not as heavy, but it's sharp. It's sharp. It could almost be a little bit staticky, like the signals skewed. It's you're thinking transformation and maybe a little chaos for good measure. And over the years, I've talked about the Jenga tower, and the Jenga tower does a little bit more than wobble. We start to see blocks fall off, but it's not going to be like crash to the ground all of a sudden. It's going to be like if you're playing Jenga. I don't know if you've ever played this game, but you can look it up on YouTube if you haven't. But if you're playing Jenga, there's this moment where things start to topple, and it's almost like slow motion. You're like, no. And so the blocks start to fall in February. And so what do I mean by that? Well, we're looking at systems change, and everybody's like, yeah, change. If we don't have something to meet the change, then it's just chaotic. And I know there's a lot of people who are like, yeah, chaos, burn it down. What if it's your house that's getting burned down? Okay. What if it's your infrastructure that's failing? What if it's your bank account that you can't access because there is a DNS server attack or a hacking? This stuff is going to hit everybody. It's Pluto and Aquarius. That's everybody. That's society. That's the wider community. It's a lot. And we're going to see a lot of international organizations under a lot of strain, whether that's NATO or the United Nations. You guys are all finding out that international law it only means as much as people who are willing to enforce it. And oh no, America kind of runs the game. That's always been the way it is, but people are new to this. So this may be shocking to you. As somebody who had to study international law as part of being a political analyst, I didn't want to go on to doing international law because I knew that it's unenforceable unless people choose to enforce it. That's where it is. And as much as everybody was like, oh yeah, the Aquarian age, it started. No, it started actually a long time ago. But it was never going to be about peace, love, and light. Okay. A musical from 1969, the year I was born, was not a divinatory message. It was a bunch of, whacked out hippies tra-la-laing and tiptoeing through the tulips, or the poppies, or whatever they were doing. Maybe the shrooms. That's not how it works. Things have got to kind of destabilize before they can be restabilized. And how do we want it restabilized? Do we want it done the way things always are, where you get rid of one despotic, cruel person in exchange for another one? Or do we want things to be different this time? Medium Matilda and I talked about that on a live stream. We're going to do more live streaming together. She's promised to get the time in so that she and I can go live again. But I'll go live with her on her side, and I'll be the guest, in the little box until she can. We'll figure it out. But we talked about 2024 and what we saw, and we both emphasized you got to get involved. Show up to vote. Especially if you're privileged enough to do that without disenfranchisement. So if you don't belong to a suppressed minority, and, so you're a white person, basically, especially in the United States, and you can show up to vote, okay, that's honestly not the biggest deal. It is the least that you can do. If you do vote down ballot, vote for your local elections, your city, your county. Sheriffs get elected. If you don't like the cops, well, write people in, because a lot of times people don't vote down ballot. And so just a few people do. And guess what? Those are the people making the decisions. Don't complain if you haven't participated. You may not like how the system works, but the system has rules, and honestly, they have been operated under for a while. But if you know how to use the rules, you can gain advantage. All right. So here's February's astrology, because it's quite chaotic. We're going to see. If you think it's been nuts, let me tell you. So February 4th, we have Mercury ingressing into Aquarius. And for those of you who are new to the show, ingress means move in. Okay. It changes signs. So Mercury is moving into Aquarius on February 4th. And then on the 5th, it is exactly conjunct Pluto. That's just very intense. Okay. So on an individual level, you might feel really obsessed about something. You might dive into some research in what area Aquarius at 0 degrees is in your chart. So basically February 4th, 5th, and 6th are going to be, pretty intense. We could see, I think we're going to see a big airline accident with that one. Some kind of big transportation accident. And it could also be that, the Red Sea gets blockaded in some way, or there's a big explosion. This could also be an explosion at a power plant as well. I'll put my predictions, as always, in the Awake Space Astrology magazine that patrons get from the horoscopes tier and above. The new moon in Aquarius happens on February 9th. And man, I'm going to talk to patrons about this one because the new moon in Aquarius in February, which starts the Chinese New Year, right? And it's the year of the dragon, Oh, the year of the dragon. Now that could be a good thing, but it's pretty ferocious. And my good friend, Amy, who's Ask Auntie Amy on TikTok, who is a real Chinese astrologer, like she's a proper practitioner of Batzi. And I've gone to her. We've discussed things. She's very good. I would definitely go check her out. Chinese astrology and Western tropical astrology work very, very differently. But once again, just like with Matilda, who's a medium, and she gives political predictions, and I line up, Amy and I line up from the Chinese astrology to the Western tropical astrology. So, when somebody's doing what they do well, it's all gonna line up. So the new moon in Aquarius is very intense. It is squaring off with Uranus in Taurus. And it squares off before the new moon, but it's still a lot. And then the full moon in Aquarius in August. Yeah, it does it too. And it does it much more exactly. And I'm like, really? I see a theme. So I'll talk about that with you patrons in the patron only podcast. And then on February 10th, we have Mercury square Jupiter. Just think of O Fortuna with screaming rubber chickens. If you don't know what O Fortuna is, it's bum, 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 bum. It's from Carmina Burana by Orff. Isn't that a great composer name? But anyway, so we've got Mercury squared Jupiter. That's going to be a tough day to get decisions done. There might be opportunities that kind of slip through fingers or whatever. Well, don't gainsay it. You might be frustrated. We're certainly going to see some very interesting communication. This is probably going to be some financial news, and it may not be so good. I think that might be more in the real estate sector, which, by the way, if you're in the Patreon Discord, I've been posting about Evergrande, a Chinese real estate company, which is massive. And it's gone in. It was ordered to liquidate yesterday. So there we go. There goes commercial real estate's going to start falling because they owed foreign investors billions. So this is going to impact the global economy. I told you commercial real estate went first. We're not going to see domestic real estate go anywhere we want it to go anytime soon. Maybe later this year, but we'll see. Because remember, the wealthy are trying to keep us poor. So, February 12th, Mars moves into Aquarius, as if Mercury going into Aquarius wasn't enough. And there's nothing wrong with Aquarius, by the way. But we've got Pluto in Aquarius. And so from the minute Mars moves into Aquarius on the 12th, it's conjunct Pluto by aspect. It's in an approaching conjunction. That's a really big energy. And it is exact on the 13th, and it will still be conjunct on the 14th. On Valentine's Day. Probably not the most romantic of Valentine's Day. Also not a time to have relationship conversations. Probably not going to go well. It's probably really going to suck for people. It could be really hot and spicy too if you're into unusual activities. So if you're into unusual activities, you may have a good time. We'll probably hear about stalking though, and we may see mass violence, and this could be violence towards protesters. This could be an attack. It could honestly be a terrorist attack on a headquarters of some kind or a community center. We could see public violence in the United States. It could be a mass shooting event. It could be internet going down. So, have some extra cash on hand ahead of February 10th. I just pull out some cash. February 16th, no, I don't think it's a bank run. I just think we're going to have trouble with, points of sales and ATMs and all that fun stuff. So get out. How much emergency cash? Depends on how much money you got. Everybody has a different budget. So whatever it takes to get a loaf of bread, some milk, and some eggs, and a tank of gas, and whatever else you can, do with cash. So February 16th, we have Venus moving into Aquarius, and Mercury will square Uranus the same day. Now, this could be very interesting. This could be like a rocket launch that goes bad. There could also be the release of some new technology. I have a feeling it's probably going to be weaponry, which would really suck. Aquarius isn't all kumbaya, let's hold hands and collaborate. It can also be forced compliance. You have to remember, it's mob rule too, and it depends on which mob has got the power. And to quote George Carlin, that ain't you and me. So there's that. Venus then conjuncts Pluto on the 17th. This could be a release of secrets. This could be some interesting stuff. Now, it could also be a very intensely, like, a day where, like, grassroots people just stand up. Where grassroots people stand up. Where like, people of unlikely groups of people get together and they're like, nah, we're not doing this anymore, and it wouldn't be a violent overthrowing of anything. It would be more of just a gathering of people saying no more. So that could happen as well. I do think we'll see some innovative technology discussed or released, and they'll probably talk about aliens that day, because why are they doing any kind of disclosure? It's not because they want to tell the truth. It's because they're trying to get you to look away from the important things. The sun ingresses into Pisces on the 18th. And things start to get a little surreal at that point. We've got Venus conjunct Mars on the 21st. Now, that can be really good energy. That's, again, if you are into interesting relationship dynamics or are more interested in something a little different, that's a great day for it. Also, if you work in technology, you know what? I'm going to back up. Everything I talked about before could also impact the tech sector. I think we could see more massive layoffs. We could see issues with shareholders demanding something. We could see CEOs in trouble. World leaders are in trouble as well. We're looking at maybe some major health issues, and I think Biden could have, like, we know he's not right. Not that he ever was, but his health is not good. There's no way with the transits that have been hitting him that he's okay. He has a 0-degree Taurus moon, so all of these things are kind of smacking him upside the head. And yes, you've requested Michelle Obama. I'll talk a little bit about that later in the podcast, like I said in the introduction, and I'll do my rundown on Patreon about that, because there's rumors about her running for president. But he may very much so. Clarence Thomas might also be in trouble, like on the 13th, 12th, 13th, 14th. I don't know that he's getting saved. He could be. I don't think he's gone yet, but he could have a health crisis. And he may be, I have a feeling he's going to retire this year or be asked to leave. Because just wait till March and April. Because remember, Mark Meadows rolled over and got immunity. He's going to be talking about Jenny. Oh my God. What is it like? February 22nd, Mercury ingresses into Pisces. And so I think we're going to see some very wet weather. We're going to see issues with navies. Keep your eye on Taiwan as well. China's really pushing the envelope. And Biden just, his policy statement of, we don't believe Taiwan's independent, it was a 180 from everything else he said. Shock of shocks. We're probably trading Taiwan to have China not interfere with what we're doing with Israel. And remember, I don't talk much about that. I will give my opinions, behind the paywall on Patreon, because if I'm going to get trolled, I'm going to get paid. February 24th, we have the full moon in Virgo, and Venus is squared Jupiter. That's going to be an interesting time. I think we could see some big storms with big erosion around then. Venus square Jupiter isn't necessarily a negative thing. It could be an innovative thing. I think it'll have to do with commerce, banking, rates. We might see a rate cut around there. The Fed may be forced to do so. Let's see. February 27th, we've got Mars square Jupiter. Mars square Jupiter. I think that's probably more volatility. Um, I honestly think we're going to see some big bada booms in the Middle East, especially around February 13th, 14th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 16th. It just keeps expanding, and it will. That drone strike into the base in Jordan, um, and it's interesting because a bunch of people are like, oh, we're shocked. I'm like, we have been destabilizing a region since 1990. Well, actually, since the 50s. Okay. Technically. But really, with great intent since 1990, 91. And so, what did you think was going to happen? It's going down exactly the way the policies are designed to make it go down. This was never about peace. This isn't about coming to a peaceful solution. There's been active provocation by the West in the Middle East for a very long time. February 28th, Mercury conjunct Saturn, and the Sun is conjunct Saturn. So that's a day. I think we'll see an issue with a world leader. There'll be some kind of announcement, or we could see somebody stepping down. We could definitely see some big weather and flooding. We could see ships sinking or cargo being released. And here's the deal. I get so annoyed because when I search for headlines with my predictions, after the fact, and I'm on my headline hunt, I don't find anything. And then 6 months later, it'll be like, oh yeah, on this date, this happened. And I'm like, oh, really? Because people are like, nothing happened, Laurie. I'll be like, yeah, a lot of things happened. Just because it didn't get, online doesn't mean it didn't happen. So that's the astrology of February. It's a lot, isn't it? It's a lot. It's a lot for me, too. I'm going to read from the slide from the 2024 year ahead. And if you're a patron at the Horoscopes and Up, you get the slides. And a discount on the year ahead video if you want the almost 2-hour seminar. You can check my link in bio. The beginning of February, well, actually, the headline, it's chaotic, because it is. It's chaotic. Beginning of February could see big storms brewing out of the Pacific that could cause ice storms, or at least cold, dry air to flow down into the jet stream. Could see some kind of intensity in the Asia Pacific region. Seismic activity increases in Japan, Taiwan, and Asia Pacific. Now, when I was talking about bringing it might drop more cold air in, that could be up in the Pacific Northwest, in through the mountain states, into the plains. It just could also be precipitation, and we do have pineapple expresses on the way, or atmospheric river. They changed the term once that movie got made. They always called it a pineapple express. Having lived in Northwest Washington, let me tell you, I've seen one year, I'll never forget the storm. It rained 8 inches in a day. Even for the Pacific Northwest standards, that was like, what? Why am I floating in my lawn? Things heat up in active war zones, and border disputes might erupt into war. So I do see an expansion. Could see an increase in accidents. Could be hacking of vital systems, airlines, and government government websites will see weapons malfunctions, especially missiles. There could be extreme use of chemical or electronic or sonic weapons. So I know everybody is asking me about what's going on in Gaza. It's not going to improve, guys. It's not going to improve anytime soon, and I wish I had better news. I just don't. If you guys remember that video where I wasn't speaking but I was crying, and it had a lot of captions, that's why. I've known, as an I see it in the astrology, and I talked about it in the Patreon, with the full moon video that I did, because I talked about that area of the world. Supply chain is further strained with unexpected malfunctioning in manufacturing. If you work with big machines or sharp objects, be careful in February, especially when Mars is conjunct, actually both Mercury and Mars, when they're conjunct Pluto. You're going to see a lot of malfunctions. Commercial real estate is further under strain, and the housing market may look like a flat line, like it's not really moving at all, but it's not crashed. And we talked about Evergrande. See, told you. I guess it's not Evergrande, huh? We might see interest rates lowered a tad as the feds try to fix the overcorrection in the economy. There will be concerted efforts to control social media. Grassroots efforts build steam globally, and there could be an attempt to limit free speech. And we're honestly seeing that. So that's a concern. We're seeing people say, well, you can't say this, and people can say other things and it's fine, but even if it's egregious, but you can't say these other things and that are actually reasonable, moral, and correct, and aren't attacking anybody or calling for the destruction of the people, but just saying, hey, what's going on is wrong. Shh, don't say that. It's frustrating, my friends. It's frustrating. So that's kind of what's up on deck in February. By the way, I wrote those slides. The first part I wrote in June, and I put further thoughts in December, or actually November, before the December event. So things are kind of going on track the way I said they would. All right. I think we need to do a patron shout out. I'll feel better, because without patrons, this would be riddled with ads. So it's not because of patrons. And I'm going to read a testimonial from one of the astrologers. Yeah, since I'm not going to run ads anymore, I'm reading testimonials by customers or clients who have worked with the astrologers and myself. Last week I did me. I'm gonna read Mackenzie. I'm gonna do a Mackenzie testimonial for this episode. Well, you heard the music, you know what time it is. And I was doing ambassador ads for Spotify for podcasters, but they canceled the program. And they have this thing called automated ads, and I'm just kind of not into it. I just don't want to. I just don't. Because I can't tell who's going to do it. So I'm going to remind you, there is no better time to start a podcast than now. Okay, you've got something to say. Say it. Just say it. Start a podcast and tell people about it. If you just start a podcast, you don't tell anybody about it, well, they're not going to know about it. So just talk to your friends. Talk to your family. Talk to your dog. Talk to your cat. Start a podcast. thankfully, we have patron support. That's why we're not ad riddled here at the Awake Space. And we got a bunch of new people joining us this month. Thank you very much. So, last week I talked about this. I'm going to thank patrons, and then I'm going to read a testimonial from one of the clients that read with Mackenzie. Mackenzie is one of the natal astrologers at wokeastrology.com. She is an eloquent translator of the chart. Okay, that's what we do as astrologers. You don't need to know anything about astrology to get benefit out of these readings. In fact, in a natal reading, you'll find out more about your chart and about yourself than you can imagine. Now, we never surprise you. You shouldn't have any surprises. We shouldn't tell you anything you don't know. But what we do is tell you what you don't talk to anyone else about, or maybe your therapist. And it can be spooky in a good way. And you're seen for who you really are. That's a gift. And Mackenzie has this beautiful way of ferreting out your gifts and finding out about the things that your heart desires most and you're maybe a little afraid to try. So, if you want a soulful astrologer, hold on. And, why don't I just read that now? And then I'll read through our newest patrons. I don't read it for like every patron we have, because that would just be a podcast unto itself. So I'm just going to read this little but powerful testimonial for Mackenzie. Okay, Mackenzie. This was such a wonderful experience, and really affirmed where I am in life right now and the direction I'm taking. I already knew astrology resonated with me, but I was blown away by how accurate and precise this reading was. It was such a gift. Thank you, H. I don't like to give people's full names just out of their privacy, but thank you, H, for such a beautiful and powerful testimonial for our reader, Mackenzie. Mackenzie was my first cosmic server. She's a very magical being. So, alrighty, let's read off our newest patrons. We've got Danielle, Nina, Ann, Tierney, Nicole, Anna Banana, Yoko, Lisa, Wendy K, Karen, Amy, Emily, Ann, Miss Callie Queen, Alyssa, Benga, Jude, Emily, Alma, Anais, Garland, Madam Fancy Pants, Megumi, Sam, Jacqueline, Stacie, Dee, Nicholas, Seth, Elizabeth, Alyssa, or Alicia, Nikki, Mandy, Gabby, Joy Through Challenges, I should say, Alexandra, April, Regina, Kat, Ashley, Adrian, Riva, Kat, Jennifer, Tam, Lauren, and Ryan. Thank you all so much for being patrons and sponsoring the podcast. I just see we got a few mystery school students. Make sure you join the Discord. You can check out the latest link in the mystery school chat in Patreon. That'll get you into the mystery school. Monday is when the next meeting is. So today, Monday, it's in the afternoon Pacific time. And you can meet people like Kirsten and Zach and Eli and Kim and Riley, who show up without fail to go through the mystery school process. All of the videos, which can be, watched one off. They're short. None of them, there's one that's like longer. We tend to break that one up for, 2 meetings or so. But it's a 24-week curriculum that helps you train your Mercury and align your Venus. Now, it may not look like it. It may not look as magical as it actually is, but it's hella metaphysical and helps you align your spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical life. And that's the most magical thing I can think of. We can wave a magic wand and go bippity boppity boo. It often misfires, but if you train your Mercury, train your mind, and align your Venus, your heart space, learn how to react or respond versus react, which is your moon, you get that stuff lined up. Life isn't always a bowl of cherries, but you certainly navigate it with more ease. So to those of you who just joined the mystery school, welcome. And I indeed will have some new material coming up. It's I'm trying to juggle this schedule. I've had some tech issues this week. If you're in one of the classes and you didn't get any of the communication, I had some tech gremlins. Get a hold of me by replying to the email you got your receipt for the purchase, and I'll get you taken care of. We had kind of like I said, it was a bumpy weekend on the tech because somebody reads everybody else's charts and not their own for the transits. I was so hell-bent on Pluto getting out of Aquarius, I didn't look at everything else. I'm like, oh, yeah, that'd all be tech glitches. Yep, that would be. I tell you guys, seriously. But we made it through. We survived. Poor Jennifer. None of that was Jennifer's fault. That was all my fault. Poor Jennifer. I'm sorry, Jen. You're an amazing professor. She's going to do over next week from this week. So because I was a bad astro mom. Bad mommy. Into timeout I go. All right, I'm going to talk about Mercury meeting up with Pluto and what that means for you guys, because this is pretty intense. And then I'm going to talk about Michelle Obama, because there's a lot of rumors about her running for president. Now, she has always said she does not want to be. She doesn't have a birth time, and I've played around with rectifying it. I'm not going to talk about her too much here, but I'll do something for patrons. I'll give some postulation there in Patreon, in the patron-only podcast. Alrighty, let's talk about that Mercury action and what it means for you and why I'm a little worried about it. So, you know what it means when I start laughing, right? On February 4th, Mercury enters Aquarius. Now, that in and of itself isn't a huge dealio, and yet it means it's also in orb to a conjunction with Pluto. Now, conjunctions are neither good nor bad. Okay, they're considered both benefic and malefic in traditional astrology. And what makes them benefic or malefic is the planets they're next to. So Mercury conjunct Pluto is really freaking intense energy. And one of the things I've been very, very concerned about, especially with the political rhetoric going around, is the limiting of free speech. Okay, the limiting of free speech. And I think with Mercury conjunct Pluto, we could see some real draconian measures around free speech. We've already seen it kind of started. And it's kind of beyond the double speak. Also, I read a lot of comments on TikTok, not just my own video comments, but other people's comments, especially on like political stories and things like that. And the amount of people are like, I can't believe the news is so biased. I can't believe. Where have you been? What do you mean you can't believe the news is so biased? First of all, we have never had unbiased news. Not really. Not really. News perspectives have always been shaped by the people who own the media. Always. That's why in our First Amendment, there's freedom of the press, because what used to happen is if there was a newspaper or newsletter that went around in the 18th century, the owner would get hauled into jail And there's still, like, when somebody writes an op-ed and it's against the editorial policy of a paper, they'll say, this is not the opinion of the paper. Okay. So the First Amendment doesn't mean that the press is not biased. What it means is they can't be prosecuted for speaking out against the government. Okay. That's what that part of free speech means. But I think we're going to see people kind of shut down on what they can and can't say. Now, there are people who would say, Laurie, that's been going on for a long time because we can't say, that an election was stolen. Well, you can say it, but there's going to be consequences to it if you've incited a riot. Inciting a riot is not governed under free speech. You also can't call people names. You can't do hate speech. Now, it appears that there is a strong lobby that is attempting to control the narrative by claiming hate speech where there is none. And so redefining what things are may cause us some problems moving past February 4th, when Mercury is exactly conjunct Pluto. And we may see people who are nonviolent, humanitarians, get tossed into jail for saying things that are not wrong. Okay. This is going to spur on grassroots movements. People are going to find new ways of being. I've told you for several years now, think like the French Resistance. And if one of you goes, yeah, I'm down for guillotines, I'm just going to be really upset with you. The French Resistance was not the French Revolution. It was during World War II. And it was badass. You see, most of France actually had no problem with the Nazis. The Vichy government welcomed them into Paris. And there were people who resisted that. And they did things like, lure German soldiers away and, get secrets out of them. There were also, people who helped people escape, carry messages, get messages out. It was a spy network, effectively. And these people had to be really, really careful, because if you got caught, you got shot, period. So learning to speak carefully. Oh, that was a sneeze. Temperature change. Learning to speak carefully. Learning to have codes that aren't obvious. So saying watermelon is... they figured it out. Okay. And you're like, but I have my rights. Mm-hmm. Kind of not. If they decide to make something illegal, that will impinge your speech. Now, it really, really depends on how the rules are made, how they're enforced, who's enforcing them. But we are not necessarily in a time of people power. We are at the beginnings of why people are going to see they need to have their power. And that usually means things are going to get freaking uncomfortable. Okay. Laurie, don't be negative. You're going to manifest it. It's already been here for quite a long time. Okay. I did a live stream the other night and I put it up for patrons only, but I talked about that there, that we've been living with fascism for decades now, ever since 9/11. They used that fear of a horrendous attack. No lies. And Americans are used to hitting but not getting hit. Okay. And they use that to pass legislation called the Patriot Act and create and another agency that I'm not going to name. Those things eroded our rights, and both parties voted for it. Bernie didn't. Bernie didn't vote for it. And I know you're all mad at Bernie right now, but I really want you to think about it. He was quiet, not because he's Jewish, okay? Because of the tenuousness of the political situation. It could impact his family. It could be, there's ramifications. And it sounds like being a conspiracy theorist, but it's not. Okay. So you need to be strategic. You need to be strategic. Alrighty. That's what I'm saying about Mercury conjunct Pluto. I think we could also see like North Korea and somewhere either missiles testing. It could go wrong. We definitely need to keep our eye on the Straits of Taiwan. We may hear about hacking or a solar storm too. There could be a solar storm. And this might be like radio frequencies, getting impacted. It could be some satellites are impacted. The internet could be disrupted. I'm not necessarily convinced. Not really convinced that we're going to lose the internet entirely, even if the cables are cut in the Red Sea. It will be hugely disruptive, though. Hugely disruptive. Because it impacts banking and commerce more than just our internet. And so we might even see like Starlink do more, like put up more satellites or something, or connect things to connect some government stuff or military stuff, or they might announce it. They may not. We'll hear about. We'll see. We'll probably, like, it depends on the contract they've got. Because but yeah, we're definitely going to hear about more missile attacks and barrages in the Levant, in the Near East, in the Middle East, between Lebanon, Syria, Israel, on the Egyptian border, Jordan, that whole area, as it sits as a powder keg. I really do expect things to escalate in the region, including with Iran. So we'll see what happens with that. That might be more towards Mars conjunct Pluto. I wish I could tell you this thing is going to resolve quick. It's not. It's just not. And civilians will suffer. And that's what's going to force grassroots organizations to go beyond what they're doing now. And I don't see people with pitchforks. I just think, the 30 elections we've got going on this year that Media Matilda pointed out, I think we're going to see a lot of condemnation for politicians, that way. And you guys have got to put pressure on the DNC. You've got to put pressure on people. I've been trolling Katie Porter. I have. I'm wholly unimpressed with her statements of supporting a right-wing authoritarian leader, Netanyahu. I don't understand, and this is even before October 7th, but how can you be a Democrat, okay, where you're supposed to be for the people, and support a right-wing authoritarian autocrat who is known to be brutal, right? He has had so much influence, and that a foreign official would have influence with our government is really bothersome. It's very bothersome. No foreign entity should have that much sway in our government. I don't care who they are and what they do. I just don't. It shouldn't be any other country. I'm like, what are you talking about? Come on, that's crazy sauce. Because some of this stuff is really putting our own national security at risk. And I say that as a political analyst who specialized in that region. And ever since 1991, I've been like, whoa, why is that your policy? That's stupid. Why would you do that? You're creating a problem. Because funny enough, if you bomb people to hell and back, you piss them off. It's kind of like in school where there's the bully and they go hitting everybody, and finally the scrawny little kid gets pissed off and just beats the shit out of him, and then that kid's in trouble. That's the best analogy. That's what happens. People have enough. Nobody wants to watch their kids killed. Nobody wants to watch their families starve to death or have nowhere to live. There's no excuse for that. None. And it shouldn't happen anywhere in the world. It shouldn't happen to any group of people, regardless of what their representatives are doing. So do we want people to do that here and be like, your government sucks, we're taking out Glendale? Really? That's the equivalency. Well, they had a politician who said this. That is the same logic, and it actually creates a whole host of problems moving into the future. Okay. And that people can make excuses for this it's very, very disturbing. It's very disturbing to me. Very disturbing. As a humanitarian. Okay. As a humanitarian. Anyone who could excuse what's happening in Sudan, well, we need the minerals. No. Or Congo, or places in Brazil, in Venezuela, and in the rainforest where they are, helping climate change right along because, people got to eat. We could innovate our agriculture. We invented technology not to have dominance over the planet, but to put ease in the lives of average people. And instead, we're going into harsher than feudalism. So the Jenga tower and the blocks are starting to wibble wobble, and we're going to see a few topple down in February. And I do expect an expansion of the conflict in the Levant to happen, if not even into the Arabian Peninsula. A little bit, anyway. I think we'll start to see some of that end of February. If there's any break in the fighting, if there's any break in global tension, it'll be between, the 20th and the 22nd of the month, when we have Venus conjunct Pluto on the 21st. So the day before, the day after, maybe even a day after that, we might get lucky and see some ease. It's still somber. It's still somber, but I'll talk about that more as we get closer into it. So what does it mean for you? What does it mean for you? Well, you're going to hear a lot of really intense news. I would want to have some cash on me, whether it's $20, $60, $1,000. It depends on what your budget can handle. I mean, it could be $5, but you want to be able to buy some milk, eggs, and bread, and there might be point of sale systems down. This could be from a solar flare or something. There could be a geomagnetic storm or something. Certainly going to see some really damaging winds, big windstorms come up with this, and they will do damage. We could see some airline accidents. We could see, things like that. I'd be careful if I was traveling on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Pay attention to your own transits. I know I have some openings next week in my reading schedule, so if you're looking for a consultation, you can book an Astro Energies reading with me, and I can look at travel dates for you. Yes, I can. Yeah, we might see big tech snafus. There's probably issues in big tech. Like we could see another round of layoffs. I talked about that already. So for you want to look at where Aquarius starts in your chart, where Pluto is transiting. And that the theme of the house, so if it's the first house, it's rethinking your self-image, seeing where you hold yourself back, where you block yourself, where maybe your ideas about yourself aren't helping you, and looking at reimagining that, thinking differently. You also might get a little obsessed about something about yourself. Like maybe you have a pimple or something and you're just like really obsessed about that. It could be you're obsessed about something about yourself, whether it's in a positive or negative way. Good if it's positive, not good if you're like dogging on yourself. If you have Pluto in the second house transiting, remember that's Aquarius, and Mercury and Pluto will be there. And so you're probably very obsessed about your financial situation. And instead of looking at what you don't have or what's going away, you want to kind of be open to inspiration around kind of resurrecting or finding your resilience or pivoting. And it's a sharp left. It's almost a U-turn. It's that kind of pivot. It's not oh, well, instead of painting this blue, I'll do pink. No, it's more like, I am going to use felt tip pens instead of a paintbrush. Or I'm going to cover myself in paint and fling myself against the wall. It's something very different, very unique, and not the same as what you've been doing. If you've been beating your head against the wall trying to make something work, it's probably not going to work right now. So you want to be a little more inventive, be open to other solutions. And don't tell me there's just one way it can go. That is not true. There's always more than one way something can work. Okay. All right. Maybe it's not the right time. Maybe you'll find out later why it's not working. Stop doing that. If it's the third house, you may have had some tech problems this weekend too. Guess where it's transiting Mercury? I do not plan on driving those days. It is a good time to have communications with people, to be inspired and work with different kinds of ideas. It's a great time for that. You may want to change the theme of everything. That you're doing. If you're writing, if you're speaking, if your ideas are going to get changed up. And there may be some really good new ideas, but you gotta let go of something. You gotta let go of some idea that's holding you back. If Mercury and Pluto are going to be transiting your fourth house, be careful with your electrical systems. So unplug, if there's weather, unplug your devices or have surge protectors and backup power and things like that. It could be appliances. You might have like a printer take a poop. You might even have a computer have an issue, or it could just be the power supply to your house. So maybe somebody has an accident into a transformer, not you, but that could happen. So things could be pretty wild. Make sure your garage is okay. If it's your fifth house, you have to let go of some insecurities. Again, it's about reshaping and transforming ideas. Be open to doing things a little differently. If you've been expressing yourself with one group of people, maybe it's time to express yourself with others. Or express yourself a little differently. If you're insecure about, performance or showing up, this is the time you really need to let go of that. Like, learn your lesson from the Leo full moon. Let go of the insecurities. They're not helping you. Okay. I know there's a lot of pop psychology and even some real psychology that will just say, it's okay, take a deep breath. No, you don't have time for coddling right now. Let it go. Let it go. Let it go. Let it go. Okay? Stop indulging in that bullshit. It's not helping you. You have no idea how we do not have time to be insecure right now. Okay? Have the confidence of a 50-year-old woman who knows she has wrinkles, gray hair, and a belly and does not care and will dress however the way she wants to dress and tell people to F off. Okay? Do that. Do that. Stop. You cannot afford to be insecure. None of you can, regardless of where the transit's going through. We don't have time. We don't have time. Shit's about to hit the fan. You don't have time for insecurities. If Mercury and Pluto are going through your 6th house, work's probably going to be intense. There's probably a ton of information. You might have some anxiety or overstimulation of your nervous system. Don't over-caffeinate on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Luckily, the 3rd and the 4th, or sorry, the 4th and the 5th and the 6th. So the 4th is a Sunday. So, deep breaths. But you got to watch your nervous system. So you need to you may have trouble sleeping. Try to rest. Okay. Try to rest. Don't over caffeinate. Stimulants may not be your friend on the 4th, 5th, and 6th. There may be some pretty big power changes or lead changes or responsibility changes at work if that transit's going through your 6th. 7th house. That would be our contracts and obligations. I'm going to tell you it's not time for the relationship conversation, but with Mercury conjunct Pluto, you probably can't help it. Good luck. I wouldn't have the conversation, but you may feel compelled. Okay, or maybe your partner feels compelled. Anything to do with contracts, leases, etc. Make sure you read the fine print. Treat this one a little bit like a Mercury retrograde in some ways. You want to be paying attention to things. I wouldn't say yes to more obligations if you're already overloaded. But if you've been looking for something you can say yes to and it'll change your life in a way you feel is fulfilling, go ahead and say yes. Not necessarily talking about an engagement. It could be a job. It could be a volunteer commitment. It's some kind of commitment. Okay. 8th house. If Mercury and Pluto are conjunct there, you see dead people. Be prepared for some ancestral work or communication or research rabbit hole. 9th house. I got to speed through because I've got like less than 5 minutes now on the timer. 9th house. I would be very, very careful traveling if Mercury and Pluto are transiting your 9th house, especially on the 5th, 6th, and 7th, or 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th. Be very careful on those days. Also, if you're looking to launch a product or service, it would be a great day for messaging. Just, you're also going to be on your soapbox, so be careful with that. The voice of God is going to come through you. I always say that it's where you can't help it. You got to say it. And you're like, I tried to be good, but I couldn't be. It just came out of my mouth. 10th house. You could see leadership change at work. You could have a position change. You might get a notice of some kind. That could be a promotion, a demotion, or a pink slip. Doesn't mean you've done anything wrong. You have a really powerful voice. And if you're a team leader, you'll be using it. 11th house. If you've got Mercury and Pluto transiting the 11th house, there may be a big accident in your community. This could be a transportation accident, like a derailment, a train derailment, a plane landing on a freeway, something like that. There may be a corrupt leader that people decide to oust or, support a grassroots candidate and get behind them. The internet might have wibbly wobbly stuff going on with it if the Mercury and Pluto is going through your 11th house, and there could be a new person or group of people that you're networking with that help change things for you in a positive way. You may get really inspired as well. You may have new collaborations, and it could mean that old connections kind of fade away. 12th house. You're definitely going to be getting some downloads. So you want to keep your perspective out of the fear zone. Remember, we can channel all kinds of information. You want to be tuned into the frequency that you prefer. If you're tuned into the collective unconscious, God help you, because it's a mess right now. You want to tune up. You want to connect to your guides and your source self, and you'll have all kinds of amazing information. It's a great time to set up a ceremony for yourself, which is a focused activity. Usually with a spiritual intent. You may get, again, all kinds of messages. This is not a time to lean into fear if Mercury and Pluto are moving into through your 12th. What you want to do is hand it your fear, hand it your anxiety, let it transmute that into confidence, because you've already survived your very worst days. All right, that is Mercury and Pluto through the houses. I'll talk about Michelle Obama for a little bit in the next segment before I get into some astrology Q&A. How's that? All right, let's talk a little bit about Michelle Obama in this segment, because there's rumors going around the interweb that she's going to be offered up if Biden steps down. There's a couple of things with that. We keep forgetting about Kamala Harris. So Kamala Harris has really good transits, and I actually have a birth time for Kamala, and I'll talk about it in the Patreon. Whether you like her or don't like her, you got to take your personal feelings out of it and understand how things work. So Kamala is vice president. That's not without merit. She had a fairly decent record in Congress. Not every bit of rhetoric against her is actually 100% true. You have to actually go look at things. She's giving very politic answers when it comes to Gaza, because she's part of an administration and her job is to back up the president and preside over the Senate. Okay. She keeps talking about a two-state solution, and I think that's a key thing. Politics, you can't just say what you want to say in certain positions if you want to hold position. So I know you love it, the tell it like it is, but that's what you get Trump when you get tell it like it is. So the system is not going to be completely smashed this year. Biden, like I said, I'm not convinced he's going to be president, and I'm not convinced he's going to be the candidate either. Trump is never going to be president. Okay. So stop wringing your hands, because that's not happening. I've said that for years, and my predictions are in my Patreon. I've got them up on TikTok too, but you have to search for them. But in the Patreon, there's a pinned post. I need to do an update before March, and I will. He's just not going to have a good 2024, and his 2025 is even worse. So, you don't need to worry about that. He's going to foment trouble, but honestly, he's not going to have many supporters left after April. So he'll just have the wackadoodles. Oh no, Laurie isn't unbiased. I'm not unbiased politically, but when I make a political prediction as far as what's going to happen, I take my preferences out of it. So like in 2016, I knew Trump was going to win. And the amount of bullshit I got from people on the left calling me a conservative, and I'm like, screw you, you centrists. I'm about as leftist as it gets politically. Like, the Democrats certainly don't want me. They're not left. They're corporatists. They're fascists too. You got secular fascism and you've got theocratic fascism. You got two flavors of the same kind of ice cream. And before some armchair pundit says, no, they're different, they represent the people, go look at their funding. BS. So Michelle Obama, one, I don't think that would be a great idea. I know the Obamas had class, and they certainly love each other. That was refreshing. And they were relatively good parents from what we could observe. And I think Michelle is probably a very dedicated mother looking at her placements. She doesn't have a birth time. So I did do a little rectification because we know about enough events in her life that I could do that. And, you don't just rectify based off of how somebody looks. I'm not convinced I have it 100%. When I went to Astrodean, there was a little note that somebody had rectified her to a Scorpio rising, and like, oh yeah, no, absolutely not. No, she is not. I'm a Scorpio rising. Let me tell you, that would not be it. I think she's definitely going to be active in campaigning for whoever is the main person. I don't think that she will necessarily be a candidate for presidency. She's really said she doesn't want to be president. And you could tell she really didn't like the restrictions of being in the White House. Like when she talks about it, she did not like being restricted, and that's because she's an Aquarius. Okay, so before I give my reveal on what I think her chart may be, okay, and I'm just speculating this because again, I haven't sat down and talked with her about her innermost experiences. And that's what it really takes for a good rectification. But just giving some guesses. I think it's plausible she's a Capricorn rising. I think it's plausible. But honestly, and I mean, she might be a late Capricorn rising. She took a lot of heat for her appearance. And if she's a Capricorn rising, then, I didn't wait long for the reveal. It's really late and I'm really tired. I taught 5 hours on Sunday. So I'm pooped. She's an Aquarius. She has the Sun and Mars conjunct. Mars is in a separating conjunction. And she's a very determined person, so I could see that. She's very much her own individual. You could tell her position is not elevated by her husband. Rather, they're more, they're really fairly equal. And it would take somebody like her with a strong personality to be with somebody like Barack, who's very charismatic, and to keep him in check, which she obviously does. And they obviously love each other very, very much. And, he's a Leo and she's an Aquarius. And opposing signs tend to have a lot of chemistry, and there's a special kind of affection because they're opposite ends of the same energy, so they get each other. I think she has Saturn in the first house. I don't think it's, it's in Aquarius also. So she just finished her second Saturn return in 2023 in January, actually. And I only know that because her Saturn's at the same degree as one of my kids. So she's got Venus. That would put Venus in the second house. Like, I'm not completely convinced I've got this 100%. Like, in fact, I know I don't. But I think I'm close. So again, I'm speculating. I just don't know. She has been very, very clear she doesn't want to be president. And Kamala, honestly, has a better chart for it. So just talking about the astrology, and I just am not convinced. So I think there's some interesting rumors. Now, again, maybe her hat gets tossed into the ring. I don't know. Now, she also keeps, if I'm correct about what her ascendant might be, that could pop Mercury into the 12th house. And so she doesn't lay out all her cards. She's a deep thinker. She's very strategic. She was probably behind a lot of strategy for Obama, because I think she's very much a strategist. And she's got a Cancer moon, She's got a Cancer moon. So, like I said, and her North Node is in Cancer. So I really think she whatever her chart is, I think she really rose into her purpose by, looking at food programs and eating healthy. She got a lot of shit for that, but she wasn't wrong on eating well. So, ketchup is not a vegetable. I don't know why people get so hung up when people are like, hey, maybe don't eat this every day, and fighting for, school lunch programs and things like that. She has a very dynamic chart regardless. I just I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it. I think there's other things she wants to do, I think she will always be somebody who believes in public service. I think she genuinely cares. But you have to remember, the Obamas are not progressive necessarily. They're very much establishment, right of center Democrats. They're very much corporatists. Maybe Michelle less than Obama, but I mean less than Barack, but she's I don't know. She's not a leftist. That's for sure. She was more radical when she was younger. But she's part of that system. And the we go high when they go low doesn't help us, It really doesn't. It's disempowering. And it doesn't work. And it leads, there are bullies in this world that cannot be reasoned with, and outclassing them doesn't fix problems. So I just don't see her running. I might talk about this when I talk about Kamala a little bit, because interestingly, they're close in age, so it's kind of interesting. I find it fascinating that everybody keeps, kind of dismissing Kamala Harris to get where she gets. She is a historic figure, and she's getting dismissed. And it's because, vice presidents are always going to be in agreement with the president. That's their job. That is their job. They knew it when they got into it. And in fact, if you remember, and maybe you don't, but when Biden was vice president, they had to shut him up, because it's not your job to be a mouthpiece for the administration unless the administration tells you to be a mouthpiece. Your job is to be there, work on whatever the president tells you to work on, and just kind of be there in case he dies, because the vice president becomes president if the president dies. Kamala has some transits, and I'll talk about this in the patron only podcast. Kamala has some transits that show her inheriting power. So, it just bothers me. And people be like, well, I don't like her. Well, what would Michelle's policies be? Let me tell you, Michelle would be a figurehead, and her policies would be whatever the policies were told to her. And I think that would not work for her. But if you think you're going to get a radical, even though she's an Aquarius sun with a Mars in Aquarius, that is not necessarily the case. She's gonna have some things she believes are right, and she's gonna push that agenda. And you have to remember, Pluto going through Aquarius is reminding Aquarians that trying to push what they think is right onto other people is gonna not go very well. So everybody talks about Leos, but Aquarians could be really, really stubborn and very fixed in their opinions about how society should be shaped, and they don't always take divergent opinions well. Not always. Don't hate me, Aquarians. I'm just saying. I am just saying. So, all right. So that's my Michelle Obama thoughts. Yeah, I think it's time for some astrology Q&A to end your day. Let's do some edumacation. All right. All right, let's do some astrology Q&A, and I'm going to be answering questions from patrons at the Awake Space Patreon. You find the link in the show note to join and support the podcast and get some astrology education. You get lots and lots of resources in there, and probably more content than you can keep up with, because I'm a content creating machine. All right, Katarina is asking, what is a Saturn return and what does it do? That's a great question, Katarina. And I actually have a video on YouTube about that, and I'll link that in the show notes. But a Saturn return, any planetary return, is when the planet in question or luminary returns exactly to the place it is in the natal chart. Now, it can be confusing because Saturn sometimes goes retrograde and then goes forward. People are like, well, I had 3 of them. No, the last pass is the Saturn return. And it actually creates a chart that shows what the next 28 years, the theme will be, where it comes to anything from, learning your lessons about wielding your authority in a certain area, or dealing with, gaining authority through certain matters, where your lessons are, where you need to build more discipline, and all of that fun stuff. So a Saturn return is really where you're coming of age. It marks a life stage. So watch the video I've linked up in the show notes, and you'll learn more about, like, how do I know if I'm in my Saturn return? What is a Saturn return? Believe it or not, we can have up to 3 Saturn returns in a lifetime, because it happens every 28 and a half years ish. Okay. And it's very visual. So I show you. And so it's really where you gain, hopefully you step into yourself as a full-blown adult. And don't worry, you don't have to have it all figured out at the Saturn return, because the Saturn cycle it's in constant motion. So every 7 years we hit a new developmental phase. So it really shows the end of the first stage of life. So, from 0 to about 28, 29 years old. So a Saturn return does not last for 2 or 3 years. So there's people out there goes, the last 3 years. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. It can't, because Saturn is only ever in a sign for 2.5 years. Yeah, so it can't be 3. And you are not in your Saturn return the whole time Saturn is in a sign. That would be impossible. But it can drag on for a while, depending on how it's moving. So I too had my first Saturn return. Saturn kind of drove over my Saturn, backed up over it, and then slammed into it again. In some ways it's kind of nice. But a lot of times it's when people, do a big change. They either get promoted, buy a house, have a baby, get married, get a divorce. All of that can happen during a Saturn return. It's a it's a marking of your authority, and where you have to start taking, into account that, nobody else is making the decisions in your life about you except you. You're grown up with car keys and a job and stuff, or you're trying to find one. So that is that. Good question, Katerina. And again, you can find the YouTube video on Saturn Returns linked up in the show notes. Alrighty. Let's see. Joni is in intermediate astrology. What is Vedic astrology and how does it differ from Western astrology? Well, Vedic astrology is based off Hindu mythology, or not mythology, sorry, religious practices. I'm tired. That just came out of my mouth. It's not. It is a religious practice. And so Vedic astrology is from the Hindu culture and religion. And I really don't think anybody who is of Western European ancestry or isn't of Hindu extraction, I don't think they have a right to do it. It's cultural appropriation. It is a different system than Western tropical astrology. So Vedic uses a sidereal system and a different kind of chart wheel than Western tropical astrology. It is accurate, but it's very different, and it operates off different premises. But we end up coming up with the same predictions. I have Vedic friends in India, online friends who are extremely accurate. So it differs. Western tropical astrology, we use a tropical. It's not Western astrology, it's Western tropical astrology, because we use the tropical zodiac. And so we're looking at it from a geocentric point of view versus a sidereal point of view. And if you look at the astrology magazine, I have the astrology vocabulary in there. One is not more pure than the other. One is not better than the other. They are just different systems, and we should not mix and match them. We don't need to. It's okay to stay in your lane. Alrighty. Let's see. Joni asks, is Jupiter's second house transit a good time to invest your money? I'm going to just say no. No, that is very, very reductionist. You cannot make, and first of all, I can't give financial advice. I'm not a licensed financial advisor worker, but that is not good astrology. And I'm not making fun of you. I really want people to understand the reason why this is a good question is a singular transit tells you not a whole lot. What is Jupiter making aspect to in the natal chart besides being in the second house? And what other aspects is it making by transit at the time? So investment is actually an 8th house matter, not a second house matter. Second house is the money you earn with your own labor. The 6th house, the 2nd, 6th, and 10th house work together. Obviously the 8th house is the opposite side, but investment is really an 8th house matter. But just because Jupiter is transiting your 8th doesn't mean, you should take everything and, bet the farm on an investment. So it really depends. Financial astrology is not beginning astrology at all. It's advanced astrology. And it's a subset of mundane astrology. And it's really, you need to understand financial markets and how things work. If you're going to do investments, you can't just use astrology without a knowledge of how financial systems work. So astrologers are experts in other fields as well. Okay. They're experts in other fields as well. However, you could buy a lottery ticket and see what happens. You could. You could invest. It just really, I would be very, very cautious. I would not just do it based on that. And I can give you an example. This is Astrologers are terrible about looking at their own charts if they're reading a lot of other people's. So I had a Jupiter conjunct my moon transit back in 2016. Um, and instead of spending time on my own chart because I was busy with everybody else's, I just saw that Jupiter. And did I sit and delineate the chart? No, bad astrologer. I was like, oh, Jupiter's coming on my moon. That's cool. Yeah, what I missed was Pluto approaching the square to my moon, and it was close enough. Like I just wasn't paying all that much attention, which I should have been because life was kind of going tits up at the time. And oh my God, that was literally one of the most intense transits of my life because Jupiter is a magnifying lens. So as Pluto's starting to squeeze my moon in the square, which is crunchy to start with, any of you guys who've lived through a Pluto moon square, add Jupiter to that where it emphasizes the whole damn thing. Well, damn. What did that teach me? Don't just glance at my chart on the fly. Do I always do that? No, that's why I had tech problems this weekend. Damn it. But good questions. Okay. I'll remember to take those. I haven't saved people's names. I'm going to put that in the show notes. All right. Let's see. What have I got here? All right, this is a good question from Cheyenne. Cheyenne's also taking intermediate. Such a bright, shiny face. So, can you describe how a Pluto transit might affect natal Neptune as it begins to transit the sign of Aquarius? And they explained that their natal Neptune is in the sign of Aquarius. I was kind of guessing that. A whole bunch of you guys will have Pluto cross your Neptune, and a whole bunch of people have already had that happen. We could call that a great disillusionment. When Pluto crosses your Neptune, you are divested of the fairy tales you believed about life, any social cultural fairy tales, and you're really seeing reality in a different way. And so I think for people with Neptune and Aquarius, the idea of their generation having a lot of power is probably gonna bite them in the ass until the powers that are almost not are gone. They're gonna run you in circles and try to exhaust you. Not everyone will experience a Pluto transit over their Neptune, but that's a long time into the future. For the foreseeable future, most people will. And your natal Neptune being in Aquarius. Now, Pluto won't be transiting your natal Neptune until it's on top of it. So if you have a 0 degree Neptune in Aquarius, all the way up to like say 5 degrees, you're probably feeling it already. Anything past 5 degrees, you're feeling a little bit of pressure, but you're not feeling it yet. And if you have Neptune in Capricorn at the end of the sign, so like from about 26 to 29 degrees, you're not done yet. You have one final disillusionment to go through, but it's actually good. Getting rid of it's a deconstruction, and then of course with Pluto, there's always a reconstruction. There's a rebirth, so you'll be able to craft your own social narratives and connect in with a higher truth once you experience the great disillusionment. Dr. Gabor Mate talks about his disillusionment and why it was a good thing, because it helps you actually form your own opinions and let go. So there's a lot of people in your age group who are like, but I need to find my dream job and I have to have these accomplishments, and what will I be if I don't get this degree and this job, and who am I? you were sold fairy tales about what a degree is going to do for you. Take it from an Xer. Take it from a Gen Xer. It's weird to go through the Pluto Neptune transit. And what's really funny is people always think like we're the first that have gone through it. No, everybody ahead of you went through it too. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to be more conservative, though. I love it when people are like, well, you're radical now, but you'll be more conservative later. Fat chance of that, buddy. Fat chance of that. I think I'm more radical now than I was when I was young. But I have perspective, so this is what is teaching you perspective. All right, Alexandra is asking, let's see. Since I read my new chart with all the accuracy, it's made a whole gang of sense. I noticed right after that I was wrong all along. I had Uranus training my natal Uranus-Neptune conjunction in the 6th. I'll admit I was attached to what I thought my placements were, but after a long period of rest and reflection, I realized that everything made so much more sense to me, and life has gotten so much brighter and exciting with this newfound openness to change and understanding of myself. I have so many more questions, but I'll keep it to just this one for now. What else could a girl like me possibly expect with a transit like this still happening? Give me the tea. I can take it. Peace and love always. Okay, so you have Uranus training your natal Uranus-Neptune conjunction. So it's still in a trine. That means it's still within 8 degrees of it. It's either separating or what have you. So because it's not going to be in a trine or any other aspect once it's out of orb, right? And the orb is the distance we use on either side of the aspect. So you've got a trine is 120 degrees, so we can go 8 degrees back and say it's an applying orb, so that's on the approach, or we can go 8 degrees forward, and that would be the separation. So what can you expect? It's really one transpersonal planet activating your transpersonal planets. Those are not personality makeups. If they're in your 6th, you could expect changing your ideas around what you want to do for work and service. You might have a calling. You might have epiphanies. You want to watch your nervous system. You definitely want to watch your nervous system. So I'm assuming, of course, that your Uranus-Neptune conjunction is in Capricorn. So, so you're shaking up a lot of this is how the world has to be, kind of letting go of some dogma around what you think, your daily life should be. I love that your life has gotten brighter and exciting. That's really nice. Yeah. So I think you're due for some fun changes, where you get more authentic with what you do in your life, and just watch your nervous system a little bit. You might feel a little overstimulated, maybe hard to sleep. So don't drink coffee past like 3 o'clock or something like that. I'm being kind of facetious, but there's that. Alrighty, who's next? Stacie. Stacie asks, I have a quick question about readings. So I've really been wanting to get a reading done, and I was thinking about booking an astro energies or career, small business, and life planning. The problem is I only have 3-4 questions. I feel like maybe 30-45 minutes. Okay, and 1 hour reading might be a lot longer than I need, but I really don't want to waste anyone's time. On the flip side, I feel like you could also really use the reading as a little bit of guidance in your life and career right now. Should I hold off on a reading since I don't have a ton of questions, or should I just go for it? That's a really good question. So astro energies, like you may only have 3 or 4 questions. Usually, like sometimes people are deer in the headlights too, because sometimes you book a reading with a very like strong clarity. Maybe you're in crisis or whatever. By the time you get to the reading, the original problem's taken care of. And then you're like, well, I don't really know. And I start talking to you about, okay, like this is going on. And I'll just say, like, what area of your life do you want me to focus on? Because I can see a whole lot in a chart. Okay. So I'll be like, you want to look at finances, work? Do you want to look at your calling? Do you want to look at like your purpose in life? And so I start honing in on what's going on. That especially in like the astro energies reading. I'm looking at the next 3-4 months, like what's up on deck. Okay. In the career life, small business reading, we look at making decisions. So and really, asking me about your love life is just going to get a sarcastic response 90% of the time. And I will tell you how to love yourself. Because once you love you and you take care of you and you don't need somebody to fulfill you, that's when you have a relationship show up that's worth something. Otherwise, you're just meeting insecurities and matching and mirroring each other. And let me tell you from experience, not fun. Not fun at all. So let's not ask me about like when you're gonna get some. That's kind of a waste of your time, because I can go so deep with like, helping you lean into your calling or decide if you need to change locations, or if you're wanting to change locations, looking at the good ones. Really assessing why you're low energy, where you are at, and what would enliven you. We can go so deep. So I think sometimes getting an astro energies reading is a good introduction if you're already fairly comfortable with your own natal chart. Otherwise, get a natal reading from somebody, one of the astrologers. But if you want to work with me, just do an astro energies reading to start. And you can do a career life path later. As a patron, I offer nice discounts all the time. So I think, yeah, it's a good one to start if you're not really sure, because career life path, small business, those are really in depth. And like, I'll go through the timing of marketing or buying or selling, a business, because I'm also a business developer, life coach. I have other qualifications. So, on the mundane level, and then on a spiritual level, like knowing why you're here, what's your job as a soul in a human body. So up to you on that one. But that was nice. That was a good question. All right, let me check. How long do I have on the recording? Ooh, I have 6 minutes and some change left. Let me go for one last question. Let's see. Oh, nice. Another reading question. So, Stacie again is asking, what are good questions and bad questions for readings? And what are some of the strangest questions I've ever gotten? So you're right. The quality of the question determines the quality of the answer. As somebody who, like, I specifically took like life coach training to make me better at communicating with people and not taking responsibility for the outcomes of other people. So like, if I tell you to do something, realizing you actually have to take the action. This is many years ago. I've been a coach half as long as I've been an astrologer. So I will lead you. If you ask me a question that's not very productive, I'll let you know, and I'll say, hey, the better question would be, how does that sound? But asking me yes or no questions doesn't get you very far. I can tell you yes and I can tell you no, and then what? You're coming to me for a consultation, so open-ended questions, honestly, just not having a specific outcome in mind either. So somebody might say, in fact, I had this happen like 3 readings in a row. And it was people wanting to sell their businesses, like they're older, they're kind of done. They want to know how to exit this or when to exit it. And so they'd be like, hey, I'd like to sell my business. When's the best timing? And also people come to me wanting to start a business. And I just had a client in December kind of want to quit their job and start a business. And they weren't happy with my answer. At first. They're really happy now. Because I was like, oh, I wouldn't do that. This is not good timing to quit your job and start your own business, looking at your chart. You have some really good stuff happening in your work life that really supports you learning and growing into being able to start your own thing. And I think you're just going to do so well in the position you're in that you would you're not going to do as well if you start your own right now. And then I ask clarifying questions like, have you taken classes about running a business? Do you know how to do that? Because that's its own thing. And they hadn't yet. I was like, well, I would stay where you're at, because you're gonna really like life in just a couple weeks. Like, you're so close to it, and then use your resources to learn and get something under your belt and get really, really clear about what you're gonna do. And so those are examples of how I work with people. Sometimes I work with people who are in college and they're like maybe not happy with their studies, and they're like, hey, what I wanted to do when I was younger, when I first started, and because of family pressure, I went in this direction. I don't know, it doesn't really float my boat. And I'll look at their chart. And I remember in one reading that somebody's family wanted them to be a nurse, and I looked at their chart and I was like, okay, are they paying for your education? They were like, no, I'm paying for it. I was like, okay, good. Because, you do better being a mortician. You don't really like alive people all that much to do that kind of caretaking. You're not really a caretaker. And they were like, oh my God, I was just looking up what it would take to be a mortician. So that kind of thing can happen. So those are good. Demanding I make an answer fit to what you want is not going to be a good question either. Like, I really want to live in New York. I'm like, ooh, looking at the astrocartography, I don't think that's a very good place for you. No, but I want to live there. And I'm like, well, why don't you go visit, but not move, because this doesn't look very good for you. And then demanding that that's the place you want to be, that's probably not useful. It's probably not useful. So, yeah. What are some of the strangest questions I've ever gotten? I've got just a couple minutes left here in this segment. I let everything kind of wash through me. I don't tend to get strange questions anymore. I also don't find a whole lot strange. So there would be that. I think I've had odd responses from people. I have people argue with me. I always find that funny. People trying to argue the astrology with me because, they read a book, and I'm like, I think one of the things you don't want to do, especially with me, is try to impress me with your astrological knowledge. Because unless, I can honestly tell by how you talk about it to know how much you know and what you don't know. So when somebody comes in and they actually, can have an astrological conversation with me, it's thrilling. But don't try to argue astrology with me in a reading, because you're just wasting you're wasting our time. It could be 45 minutes, it could be an hour, but why would you try to tell me what you think you know about your chart when I've been doing this for 3 decades? So arguing with me about what's there is probably not a good idea. I'm not going to yell. I'm just going to be like, I will tell you, would you let me be the astrologer? So, because that's my job. That's what you're paying me for. I don't do that to other astrologers when I go to them. I don't try to argue the astrology. I might be like, dude, where are you seeing that? Oh, blind spot, that kind of thing. But you don't want to do that. But yeah, these were all great questions. I was deleting questions because I'd keep reading the same ones over and over. That didn't help. But I want to put you guys in the show notes, just your first names, because on the Google form it has just what name do you want on the podcast. So we'll get that in the show notes. So these are questions coming from patrons. So we'll do the patron only Q&A as well in the Awake Space Patreon. I want to thank all of you for being listeners. We're still in that top 3%. We're number 19 in the Feed Spot list of astrology podcasts. I'm really proud of that because, we don't have a big team. Deep breaths. Enjoy the relative ease of this week before it gets wild. And I'll talk to you next week here on the Awake Space Astrology Podcast.